This is one thing I have a hard time with when it comes to following and talking about sports, because it's crazy to me how quickly narratives change, how one-sided takes can be, all because of the happenings of just a few games. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying, there isn't an argument for some of the current narratives going on around this Bulls team. I do think there are issues about the Bulls that absolutely do need to be addressed, glaring holes when it comes to late game execution. But to me, context is always important when talking about these things, because yes, the Bulls have been outplayed in the fourth quarter for the third straight game now. The last two in particular were situations in which the Bulls had the lead in the final 2 minutes of the game and could not close it out. And yes, in all three of those games, the opposing team had their superstar, that guy, as everyone likes to say, to put them in a position to run the Bulls out of the gym. But need I remind everyone that before the season started, when we all looked at the Bulls' opening stretch of the schedule, and then also knowing that Coby White was going to be missing some time, we all thought, all right, this opening stretch could get really ugly, to the point where it would be a real possibility in the first 11 games of the season that the Bulls go 2-9, maybe even 1-10. And that's not hating or being overly negative. No, it's because the Bulls in their first 11 games we're going to be going up against all teams, with the exception of probably the Sacramento Kings, all teams that were expected to be playoff contenders, all teams that finished above 500 last season. After playing the Spurs tonight, the Bulls now rank number 1 for the hardest strength of schedule in the NBA right now, and yet the Bulls are sitting through their first 10 games 6-4. We talked about how, hey, if the Bulls can win 5 games in those first 11 on the season, that would be incredible. I would have said they exceeded expectations if they can win 5 of their first 11 games. The Bulls at worst now will be 6-5 in those first 11, and outside of that game against the Bucks, they were in every single one of those games. And even in that game against the Bucks, they were in it up until the final minutes, and then the Bucks obviously ran up the score because it was a cup game. But anyway, my point in all of this is, despite all this, despite the fact that the Bulls so far this season really have not had a bad game, like a really bad game where they just get embarrassed, despite the fact that, they've already exceeded expectations with their first stretch of the season and still a winning record, even in the hardest schedule in the league thus far, all of a sudden, the sky is falling again, and it's back to, well, see, why the Bulls, they need a superstar. They're not going to truly compete without having that guy. Man, the Bulls were not supposed to win this game tonight, not without Josh Giddey and Coby White in the lineup, and I fully expected the Bulls to get blown out of this one. And at the start of the game, it looked like that was going to be the case, that it was going to be a long night for the Bulls. But no, the Bulls actually played pretty well in this game, all things considered, without their main offensive engine and, of course, their offensive firepower of Coby White. They actually held their own. They actually played well against Wemby, except for the final minute and a half where they just let him pull up from 3. But they weren't letting Wemby get anything easy inside. They drew a couple charges against him, forcing him to turn the ball over when he was moving through the paint. Yeah, he's still Wemby. He's still got his. He's one of the best players in the league. In my opinion, he's already a top 5 player in the NBA. So it's not like you're going to completely lock him down. But for a Bulls team whose interior defense has been below average, they did better than what I would have expected. Even scoring in the paint more than I would have expected the Bulls to do, knowing Wemby is roaming around the basket just waiting to swat things away, which it's still hilarious to me how much just his presence alone deters shots where guys will drive to the basket and then just bring it out, just sensing Wemby is nearby, not even trying to put it up because they know it's not worth it. But anyway, as I was saying, the Bulls were not supposed to win this game. But because they kept this one close, because they came within the final minutes of having a lead and then blowing said lead, the argument goes back to being fixated on, well, this is why the Bulls need a star. Whereas if the Bulls had just gotten blown out, like most of us had anticipated, it would have been, okay, yeah, makes sense. They're playing Wemby and they don't have Josh Giddey or Coby White, and everyone would have carried on with their day. Not that it matters, the fact that the Bulls did beat the Pistons with Cade Cunningham or Paolo Banchero from the Orlando Magic. They beat the Hawks, who have Trae Young. They did beat the Knicks in one of those games against Jalen Brunson. I mean, the Bulls have gone up against stars, superstar level players, even Tyrese Maxey. The Sixers, the Bulls beat them. Don't forget that. They shut them out in the last final 6 minutes of the fourth quarter, but people forget that, right? So instead of focusing on the positives of what the Bulls have done well, of what the Bulls have done despite the odds being against them in these last 2 games to be in these matchups, bringing it down to the wire, playing their game, keeping up the pace of play, keeping up the energy, because they didn't execute in the final minute, all that goes out the window, and it's, well, you need a superstar. As if getting a superstar generational talent is just so easy to come by. And look, this isn't me saying, well, the Bulls don't need a star. They don't need superstar talent for them to compete for championships. They just need 8 to 9 really good players, like AK said last year. No, every team needs that star or stars, but the Bulls aren't there yet. This was expected to be another year where they weren't going to be competing, where they were going to be focusing on development and still trying to win games. No one thought they were going to be competing for a championship. And if you thought, after that 5-0 start that they were going to be suddenly competing for a championship, you're kidding yourself. But it doesn't mean the Bulls can't get to a place where they could be in a position to land a star or develop one of their own into a star. And it also doesn't take away from the fact that the Bulls are still playing good, solid basketball. So I know I kind of digress from what happened in this game specifically, but yeah, it bothered me because I thought the Bulls played pretty well, all things considered, much better than expected. They played a fun game, a competitive game against a contending team in the West. But the takeaway from a lot of fans right now is, see, no superstar, even though the Bulls have beat teams with superstars already this season. And I just think that's a lazy narrative that doesn't give the full context of what's going on. Now, as far as this game, I love what I saw from Kevin Huerter and Tre Jones, both taking the next man up mentality. Didn't like that last shot from Kevin Huerter to try and tie up the game after Wemby sank that 3 to put the Spurs up 3. That wasn't a good shot, tough shot, but overall Huerter had a nice game where he made smart plays, great shot selection, good cuts to the basket when Wemby was overcommitting to his man on defense. 23 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists for Huerter, hit some big threes as well. And Tre Jones, I mean, what impressed me most about him was him getting into the teeth of the Spurs defense, scoring inside despite the Spurs size, and obviously him being a very undersized player. 20 points, 7 rebounds, 7 assists, 2 steals for Tre Jones, just one of the more underrated players in the league on one of the best contracts. Ayo had a great game as well. 20 points on 50% shooting, 3 for 5 from 3. Modest, actually, a solid game, and I was surprised he wasn't in there to close things out. 15 points on 5 for 9 shooting, 5 rebounds, a steal in the block. Vooch had a weird game because he actually shot it well from deep, even when he was being contested by Wemby. But of course, like a lot of bigs do, who are being defended by Wembanyama, you're going to struggle in the post. He tried, but only hit 1 shot in the paint in this game. And that weird missed airball layup where he was wide open, that was painful to watch. I guess he just didn't expect to be that open or something on that cut. But it's little things like that that can be the difference in a game that ends up being so close. And then, of course, that lane violation in the final minutes that gave Luke Cornett that extra free throw that he initially missed, that was bad. And of course, letting Wemby go off in those final seconds. So yeah, not the best game for Vucevic, but I go back to how important it is, how critical it's going to be to have Coby White to help in close-out game situations and getting some points when the opposing team is going on a run. Obviously, he's not the quote-unquote star everyone keeps talking about, but he is one of those guys that can close out games. He can get you a bucket when you need it, and in a game like tonight, and a game like against the Cavs as well, he was definitely missed. It's unfortunate though because the Bulls really being 8-2 right now on the season was very practical. Could have been a real thing. They really were that close, but the Bulls fall to 6-4. They've got the Pistons now on Wednesday in Detroit. Then they finally get a long break, some time off, and finally get some easy teams to go up against, starting with the Jazz on Sunday. Hopefully Coby White will be back by then. But anyway, guys, I would love to hear what you think, your thoughts on this game. Let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.